One, two, three. Hello, and welcome to X-Rated, the X-Men animated review show, exclusive interview series. We are your hosts, Davan Skelhorn and Andre Mayech, and our special guest for this evening,
Hi, everybody.
writer Len Uhley. Thanks for joining us, Len.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Pleasure to see you both, and whoever else is watching, because one never knows with this sort of thing.
It's true. Well, yeah, most
They have a
people
pretty dedicated
digest it
fan
after
base.
the fact, but yeah, we do. They love us.
Okay.
I
see.
And
we all have our collections of toys in the background.
yeah, it's true. What do you got back there? Is that a Jubilee? I see.
I've got a really lovely sideshow collectible statue of Nightcrawler.
I love that.
Oh,
It's beautiful.
I've
cool.
also got. I'm doing this back.
Oh, I see that. Oh,
That's
very
Megavolt, a character I created for Darkwing Duck. The thing next to it is a Writers Guild Award. I'll get my head out of the way. There's that's a character from Veggie Tales. And if we go this way, you'll see some Octonauts. You'll see Feifel, the little Jewish mouse from American Tail.
Oh,
and
yeah.
a character
I love that.
created at Disney. So and up
You
there,
created Fievel?
I'm sorry. I don't. No.
co-created
I want to be very
Oh.
clear. I did not. No, I created Bonkers. Feifel was created for the good folks at Amblin, and no, I had nothing to do with that. But I did write two home video sequels for American Tail 3 and 4, which were released by Universal Home Video when there was home video. That was a while ago. So that's,
remember those days.
Yes, physical media. I just. This is going to immediately date your podcast. I just read today that Netflix, as of September of this year, will no longer be distributing DVDs. That legacy business is going away. So if you like your physical media, buy whatever you can now, because that's becoming.
I think they stopped in Canada a while ago. They haven't been a Netflix box here for a while. I remember when there was one for a little while, and they're the red box, and then it was only for like a couple months, and then it sort of faded out. So I'm a physical media guy too. I collect Blu-rays, and I have a lot. So I usually grab the things I really like just to have them my own version. But I can certainly understand the appeal. That's for sure.
Absolutely, and you can see up there. You can see some of the DVDs, which are titles I've written over the many thousands of years. So
yes.
It's a little bit of a decorative thing more than anything else at this point, because all of us watch via streaming and all that sort of thing. So
I like the ritual, like to take out the thing, because I collect records as well, like vinyl. So it's like to take it out, to hold it, to look at it, to read the jacket, to put it on, to watch it or listen to it. And I really enjoy that. But
I agree. Yeah. But then I'm coming from another time period, so
well, hey, I think we all are.
Yeah.
But anyway, so what do you guys want to talk about today?
Well, we generally have a sort of like, I have another podcast where I just interview people, and Davan has, obviously is it's the X-Men. Like I'm a fan of X-Men as well, but Davan is the Uber X-Men fan. So generally I ask questions about your life, and then Davan asks questions about the show.
Oh, great. It's a therapy session.
Just basically
that element to it. Yeah.
That's true. I mean, we can go through whatever issues you want. I mean, I'm not qualified as a therapist, but I could certainly give it the old college try.
Well, this could go on a bit, and you'll have to charge me $125 a minute. But
the first one's free. If you enjoy it, we'll talk when he comes back.
True.
Yes, it sounds like something that. Well, anyway, I have to keep it clean for the kid audience. But okay, good.
Why don't you take it away, Andre?
I await your questions.
Well, where did you start? Where were you born?
Oh gosh, I am a native of Los Angeles. There are some of us who
There's very
actually
few
are.
of those out there.
I didn't know there were any. Yeah.
I've
Yes,
met one before on a movie I was on. He was a native of Los Angeles as well. Another
I
actor.
have been here my whole life or longer, and grew up, in on the wrong side of the tracks in Beverly Hills. So I had a very weird childhood. And I went to college here. I went to school at UCLA. And basically, except for 1 year in Orange County, which is south of here, I have lived my entire life in Los Angeles County in various parts of the city. And so I have a very boring story to tell about, no exotic locations or anything like that. But it served me well. And as I've said elsewhere, it's like I grew up in a company town. So show business kind of made sense as a career choice. If I had grown up in Detroit, I would have wanted to go to work for the Ford Motor Company. But instead, I wanted to go to work at a TV production company or a motion picture studio or something like that. It just was completely natural, which of course makes no sense to anybody else, in the world, but there it is. So,
but there are a lot of things, like different parts, facets of that industry. So why was writing what drew, why was that what drew?
Well, I wanted to be a writer before I knew I wanted to be a writer. But the first script I have in a storage box somewhere is a Star Trek script I wrote for my 6th grade English class.
Ooh.
Davan's a huge Star Trek podcast, so
Davan's a huge Star Trek guy.
Okay, well, yeah, I already had the pointy ears, so I automatically, gravitated towards Spock.
Mine too on the shelf there. Yeah. I can match it.
Attached. Okay, so I started writing. I did student films.
Here's the Star Trek wall.
Oh, hello.
Whoa, wow.
I started writing student films, in 8th grade, and then in high school, and started writing also musicals in high school. And when I heard people laughing and applauding, I said, "Oh yes, this sounds like a good idea." It actually was a very strange career choice, but I had no other skills. Sciences and I had a parting of the ways in the 11th grade, so it only made sense that I would do this. And so I went to UCLA, local kid, took the bus to school every day because, like I said, wrong side of the tracks. But then I was living in West Hollywood. But anyway, I digress. So I eventually applied for and was accepted to the UCLA Film School. And at the time, and I don't know if they do this anymore, there was a 2-year undergraduate part of the film school. And so I got in there, and naturally, my first student film, which is in Super 8, ask your parents about that, a 1-song, 9-minute sound sync Super 8 musical, which was, kind of like, again, oh, this is what I should be doing. And at the same time, in that same junior year, I had my first sale, which is kind of weird, again, on a show that no one remembers called Holmes and Yo-Yo. It was a 13-episode series on ABC about 2 cops, one of whom was a robot, by the same people who had done Get Smart. And I had grown up watching shows like Rocky and Bullwinkle and Get Smart. And these were, like, to me, the guys who were doing Get Smart were comedy gods. So naturally, I went in there. It's something that would never, ever, ever happen today because the business is so very different. But I saw the show got picked up reading one of the trade papers, Variety or Hollywood Reporter. And I said, oh, that sounds like fun. And I admire those people. So I called the production office at Universal and I said, can I see a copy of the pilot script? And the director of development there said, sure. Now,
wow, that's crazy.
Armies and armies of people saying, no, you can't. And how dare you, sir? But anyway, so I got a copy of it and I wrote a story. I didn't even write a script. I wrote a story outline. And then I sat on it because, come on, I'm a college student. I have no credits. Who's going to read something from somebody like me? So again, I'm living at home. I'm a commuter to UCLA. And my mom said, tell you what, I'll mail it in for you. So she did. And like 2-3 days later, I get a call from the story editor on a Friday afternoon, and he says, I'm going to make your weekend. And that was my first writing assignment.
Oh my God, that's amazing! Holy crap!
Ridiculous, and also profoundly unprepared for this. Okay, I may have had some modicum of talent, but I didn't have the discipline. And so what they did was they took my story, and they took something else that they owned from a guy named John Landis. I don't know whatever happened to him.
Oh yeah, he went nowhere. That guy.
I'm kidding. He was probably in pre-production on Animal House by that point, but I don't know.
Wow.
Sure. Anyway, so they smished the two things together, and I got to write the script, and I did a fairly awful job because, like I said, I didn't know what I was doing. But it was my first writing credit, and I got shared credit, and I was so exciting, I can't tell you. The following year, I created a format for a television series. And it was about the first Black president of the United States. Like that could happen. It was 1977, so I was a little ahead of my time. Anyway,
yeah, I'd say, wow.
Like that robot cop thing. How could that ever happen?
Like we haven't seen that before since. But anyway, and so that series format I had optioned was, I again, one credit. I wasn't given the opportunity to write the pilot script. They hired a professional writer, and the professional writer didn't do a great job. But anyway, ABC paid the bills on that, and nothing ever happened with it. They never shot the pilot. But I'm graduating college. I have 2 credits under my belt, and I'm saying to myself, oh, my goodness, this is going to be great. Rocket to the moon, piece of cake. 3 years of radio silence followed. Okay, nothing happened. I would write the occasional spec script. I was working odd jobs, things like that. But, it was like, ugh. But then, with the occasional assignment or option something, story or something, and eventually I ended up writing industrials and corporate shows. Now, these are like the wonder and the glory of International Widget, sales presentations and videos promoting products and things like that. Some of them turned out well. Some of them were like, yee. And so and what was great about the whole experience was that's where I learned how to be a professional writer, writing for the client, writing on a schedule, taking notes, being paid very poorly. And so by the time, several years into this, one of the companies I worked for, the mom and pop companies I worked for in industrials, the pop was the voice of Duke Igthorn on the Gummy Bears, one of the first Disney TV animation television.
I watched that.
Yeah. So I was introduced by Michael Rye, the late Michael Rye, who was he was a voice guy back in radio. Okay. It was like I've forgotten which series, but a bunch of them. Anyway, so he introduced me to Jim Magon, who was a story editor on the Gummy Bears. So I wrote 1 freelance Gummy Bears, and then I wrote 1 freelance DuckTales, which was a Star Trek spoof. You may see a pattern forming here, where no duck has gone before. Watch it on Disney Plus. It's kind of cute even today. And so
I'm definitely watching that tomorrow.
100%. Okay, opportunity knocks here. Huh? Yeah. So after that, they were ramping up. They were doing the 65 episode orders, which sort of was with DuckTales, and then they started doing the Disney Afternoon, which was something that again wouldn't exist today, but that was a block of 2 hours syndicated on independent television stations in the U.S., and you probably saw them also in Canada.
Canada too. Oh, it changed my life.
Yeah,
those shows, and then they were building up this giant staff of writers and artists and several floors in an office building. And we were turning out these 65 episode series, one after another. And so guaranteed employment as a writer. Wow. So that was the fork in the road for me. I went from being a precocious, aspiring, and then struggling sitcom writer to being steadily employed in animation. That was the change in my career. And so that is where I've spent the bulk of my writing career, doing cartoons. And I was on staff at Disney for 5.5 years. And when I was done there, that is to say my contract was not renewed, a friend of mine who had been there and then had already left, his name is Eric Lewald, and Eric Lewald was the showrunner on X-Men, the animated series. So fortunately, having read comic books when I was a kid, I knew superheroes as much as I did funny animals, so I could make the transition, and Eric was kind enough to hire me to write a total of 3 of X-Men, the animated series. Not a lot, but they were well received, and that was the beginning of my animation writing career. And I started my superhero animation writing career, and I was doing that and silly comedy bits and preschool and faith-based animation. That's been a weird side career as well. So I've been at this for 37 years now, writing cartoons, and I'm silly enough to keep at it, and I still sort of, once in a while tipping my toe back in live action. I've got a current sitcom script, which I like a lot, and a lovely, touching comedy drama, that would be nice for a streamer to pick up. And after the Writers Guild is done with the strike, of course. I want to be very clear about that.
Right. Yes, I thought they were still in strike there. So
no, we haven't struck yet.
Not yet, right?
That's right. Well, there's still, I guess, there's still tensions are high. I guess.
Oh, they're in the midst of negotiation, and the contract expires May 1. And I don't want to date this recording, but
no, it's fine.
Stuff's going to happen in one way or the other. I hope the producers take the hint and negotiate seriously and make a deal that helps the Writers Guild. But this is probably not germane to what you want to talk about, because anyway, as I mentioned, I ended up writing for X-Men the Animated Series, and it was a wonderful experience working with some really, really talented people. On the art side, Larry Houston was the producer director on that. And of course, working for Eric, who remains to this day a dear friend, along with his wife Julia, who was also a writer.
They're great.
Yeah, we had them on the show before. They're fantastic.
Right, yeah. So they're good folk, all of them.
Yeah. Well, just glancing at your IMDb, it's like my childhood. Like almost every show that I watched as a kid is here, which is just fantastic. So,
mine too. That's what I'll keep saying.
Yeah. I'm pretty happy about Darkwing Duck, because I was a massive fan of that as well. But before we get into all that, I'll let Davan ask the X-Men question.
Yeah, Darkwing was a lot of fun to work on. Really,
not anymore. Now this is Trex rated. Star Trek. So, I got to know what your Star Trek script was about.
The one from sixth grade.
Yes, the one from sixth grade.
I don't know. I'm sure it was a landing party, and it was probably 10 minutes long, because I could not tell you. I have not seen it, put eyes on it in longer than you guys have been alive, so I cannot tell you what it was about. But someday I'll find that box, and someday I'll read it, and I'll say, so that was what this was all about? Who lets a sixth grader figure out what you're going to do for your career? That's not.
I'm sure it was better than Spock's brain.
Now, come on. That you're right. It was not a great episode. But anyway. Yeah, but they did other ones which were better.
Yeah.
Yes, they did.
You go for that again, Davan.
Oh, okay. Well, what do I got here? Well, you said you were familiar with the X-Men beforehand. We had.
Oops. No, hang on.
Go ahead.
I was.
No, is that not true?
Deep
comics.
I was a DC reader.
Oh no,
DC guy.
No, yes.
Quite all right. We accept all kinds here.
There's
one of those.
Yeah, there's a.
My Spider-Man mug and I will be over here.
Yes. In fact, Spidey is pretty much the only. No, Spidey and Thor. Now that I think of it, I've never written for him. I've written for Avengers. I've written for X-Men. I've written for Fantastic Four. I used to joke that, one of my favorite, when people would ask at conventions, who's your favorite X-Men? I'd say Submariner. And that would get a laugh. And now he's actually in the movie.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
He's one of my favorite Marvel characters, so I can relate.
He is a really cool character to write, too.
Yeah.
Anyway, I read DC Comics, and but I could, sling the lingo well enough.
Okay.
So thankfully, they were extremely well organized on the X-Men series. Larry Houston is a walking encyclopedia of all things X-Men and Marvel. And so he, whatever we didn't get out of there was a giant encyclopedia that was one of our reference things, and comic books were made available on it. So I got up to speed very quickly on that. And the first one I did was Cold Comfort, which was the first time Bobby Drake, Iceman, showed up. And that also had X Factor in it. So that was real fanboy service there. and
for me.
Knew about. I wrote it for you specifically. So that was a lot of fun, and a lot of people like that one. But the one that people remember most fondly, that I get a lot of comments on, either online or at conventions. We're doing fewer conventions these days, but whenever I appear, the thing that they want to talk about, whether I'm signing stuff or on a panel, is Nightcrawler, because that was the one that resonated with a lot of people, and to this day, it's, to the best of our knowledge, it was the first mainstream animated series episode that dealt with issues of faith. So that rang a lot of bells for a lot of people. And then there was the third one I did was called Bloodlines, and that's when Kurt Nightcrawler meets his mom, Mystique. So parent of the year there,
and half brother.
Yeah, and all the other bits. So again, we had a lot of resource materials available to us. We understood what the org chart was of who was related to who, and so that was very helpful when writing these things. But so I was really lucky. I was very glad there are a lot of really fine writers who worked on that series and the subsequent series too. But I was with a good crowd on that.
Well, I was curious about
that crowd. We had sorry, Andres.
Oh, you go ahead.
Speaking of that crowd, we had Brooks Wachtel on the show.
Yes, and he and I actually we just were on a panel that Larry had organized down at WonderCon not long ago. So it was Brooks and myself and Dave McDermott, who also wrote a number of episodes with his then writing partner Stephen. Oh dear me. Oh gosh.
Yeah.
I'm blanking. I'm sorry, guys. It's late in the day here for me.
No worries.
Steve Melching. Oh my God, what an idiot I am. Okay, Steve Melching, great guy, lovely fellow. Apologies when he watches this. I'll just blame it on the fact that this is decaffeinated tea.
Mine is not. They're all great.
Anyway, so so these again, a lot of good writers working on this thing. Eric was really good. Eric Lewell was really good about casting people. This show should be written by this guy because he's a fan of history, or he's interested in issues of faith, which was the case for me.
Yeah, that's what I was curious about. I wanted to ask you if you were, because you worked, I see you worked on Veggie Tales and a few other things that are sort of faith-based things, and you mentioned earlier as well. So I was curious if that was a through line to your personal interest, or just something that you fell into.
Well, I think like a lot of people, I'm always looking for answers to stuff I don't understand. And yes, as it happens, I was, I became baptized Episcopalian as an adult, but that's a long, complicated story. But the fact is, I was sort of in that process of, figuring out what the heck for myself. And Eric knew that, and so he said, "Oh, let's give him Nightcrawler," because again, I did not create Nightcrawler. I want to be very clear about that. Some people say, "Oh, look what you did." And I said, No, the character pre-existed, and they established all of this beforehand. And so that's why, I was just very fortunate to be put in the position of writing something that people liked. And yes, I have written for Veggie Tales, which is a lovely cast of characters. I did 12 episodes of something called Superbook, which was on the Christian Broadcasting Network. I kid you not. And so once in a while, I sort of, I hop over from, funny animals and people in long underwear over to, this other approach, which is interesting, uses a different set of muscles. But generally speaking, working with nice people who are very serious about their faith. So I have to tamp back my, let's see if I can throw a joke in there. Because frankly, they don't want the Sermon on the Mount to be 20 minutes of stand-up. So you got to be careful.
Yeah, that's true.
You want to do that version.
Pick and choose your comedy battles, I guess.
That's right. Exactly. Figure out who your audience is and don't push. Okay. Anyway, so that's kind of a fun, weird sort of sidebar. But most of the time, it's been boys action adventure. I did 16 Static Shocks, 24 Ben 10s. I was on staff at Warner Brothers for a little while, and that's where I did the Static Shock, and I did.
Yeah, that has a pretty big cult following too. That show.
Oh, cult following.
Yeah,
it was a giant franchise for them,
yeah.
and only had 4 seasons, but that was a wonderful show. The good thing, okay, how can I put this? Working on Static Shock, I was working for the showrunner on that was Alan Burnett, and Alan Burnett was the guy who basically from the beginning of Batman the Animated Series forward for decades, Alan was the guy who created, not created, but sort of supervised all of the Warner Brothers animated stuff. And he was just a great storyteller, a lovely fellow, a good friend, and he was kind enough to hire me on to do Static Shock, which was a show that allowed us to do tell stories that were kind of more than just everybody after the treasure blowing stuff up. Really stuff from the heart. Now, Alan and the late Dwayne McDuffie, who actually was one of the co-creators of the character Static, they won a Humanitas Award for an episode about a kid bringing a gun to school. So that was a big deal. I wrote one that was called Frozen Out, and that was one about a young lady, the villain du jour, but she wasn't a villain at all. She was troubled. She had some psychological issues. She was homeless, and we could tell stories about stuff that's the human condition. Because why do you become a writer? To say, here's my opinion of the world, and so stuff like that. And then same thing. When Dwayne McDuffie was running a couple of iterations of Ben 10, sort of aged up Ben 10, we got to tell all sorts of really interesting stories, some very silly and funny and broad and science fiction-y, and some kind of offbeat. And so that's, it's not every day you get to do that as an animation writer, but when you get the opportunity to do that, if you got people who are willing to sort of go to the mat and say, I want to tell us stories that are bigger than the same old, there's a fight in Act 1, there's a fight in Act 2, that kind of stuff. Those are fine, and that's the bread and butter. But once in a while, you get to do something extra, and those are the ones you could be most proud of, like the Nightcrawler episode or the Cold Comfort, Frozen Out, things that are about people. Because even though it's people with superpowers or a talking bear, it's all we're just writing to entertain people with stories about people.
Yeah. Well, that's the one thing that stood out to us when we watched the Nightcrawler episodes. We just watched Bloodlines last week, and whenever he appears, he's so different than anything else that's seen in that show. And also in cartoons really that time period, as far as his motivations go and him as a character goes. Like you were right about saying that like a faith-based character as a hero. I mean, he's often used as maybe some kind of a fanatic or a zealot or something in cartoons, but it's rare you see one that is heroic beyond anything that's based on the Bible or something like that. So it was very cool and very unique.
Very interesting character. I think co-created by the late Len Wein, if memory serves.
Dave Cochran too.
Dave Cochran, I think, wrote it.
And Cochran, yes. Yeah. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, kind of thing. I got, I'm just this guy, as they said in Hitchhiker's Guide.
My favorite book.
Yeah. So it's just, I've been very fortunate to work with some really talented people, and 260 some episodes later, I'm beginning to get the hang of it. Eventually I'll go pro, that kind of thing.
We're rooting for you.
Well, I got some further questions, but I'll let Davan take one. So next question, Davan.
Brooks mentioned that you guys would have these meetings on X-Men where they would discuss certain stories that they wanted to tell coming up, and that you guys could kind of put up your hand and sort of take ones you wanted. Did you do that with any of those, or were you just assign them because Eric kind of knew your interests?
I think, well, I was only in like one of those meetings, and that was fairly early on. Again, they were already up and running. I came in third season-ish, so because I was previously employed at the Walt Disney Company, and so not available. But once I got in on it, I think I attended one or two meetings. But usually I think Eric would say, this is one for you and this is one for you. And yeah, I'm sure you could put, if you had if you were really into the Marvel characters and you comics and you'd read this story or that story. I know with Brooks, he wanted a couple of the stories. I think he worked on the Phoenix Saga or one portion thereof, and so
the finale,
really, 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 really wanted that kind of stuff, and that's fine too. Every show is different. Sometimes if you've got a show that has a season-long arc, you're just fitting into doing that. Episode 5 of 7 that are telling that story, or you can go in and pitch ideas. It just, like I say, from one show to another, the rules change. So other shows, I would go in and pitch 6 ideas or whatever, or 10 ideas, and other shows, it's like, Len, here's something for you. Okay, glad to have the work.
How much like I'm just looking at some of the stuff you've worked on, and it's like bonkers 3 episodes, like all these things that I love, Darkwing Duck, Talespin, Chip and Dale. Like, how much, when you go into that job as a freelance writer hired to do one of these shows, like how much, I guess at this time, it wasn't like you could go load it up on Disney Plus and watch all the episodes that came before it to get your material. Did they just send you tapes, or did you just have to follow a few scripts to give you an idea of the characters and what they had established already? Or
with regard to the Disney stuff, I was on staff during all of that. So we were all one giant group of people, breaking stories or pitching stories or something like that. For other shows, if you're coming in as a freelancer, if you're lucky, they have a series Bible, and the series Bible gives you some sense of sort of what the world is like. And then if there are other scripts, the pilot and several others, if it's a show that's been up and running for a while, then you have an opportunity to, see episodes, or failing that, at least read scripts, so you can begin to get the voice. Because, you always want to bring your personal skills and quirks to the work, but at the same time, you also have to fill in. You don't want to be writing a dark, violent comedy and try to do a musical number. As much as I like musical numbers,
I'd like to see that actually.
Yeah. But I mean, if you're writing for some blood and gutsy show, it's not going to be. You don't want to veer too far, because they'll have to. Then you won't get hired again, because that means that the story editor, showrunner, whomever, has to take his weekend or her weekend and rewrite what you've done and messed up. So you want to sort of try to fit within certain parameters, as often as you can. That way they ask you back if you're fortunate. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Should we throw to an audience question here?
Sure.
You have an audience?
One or two.
Dan the Man asks, he says, "Hey everyone, question for Mr. Uhley. How does he feel about creating a pilot to shop around for investors?"
I would love to do that. I've done that from time to time in the past. Like I say, right now I've got a sitcom pilot that's set in a struggling animation studio, because write what you know, right?
Of course.
And I've written other attempts at that in the past. The chances are, it's an extraordinarily hard thing to accomplish. There are big deal showrunners who aren't able to get shows up and running these days. So some guy like me, the odds are difficult. But hope springs eternal. I'd like to, before it's all said and done, I'd like a chance to do something, preferably in live action, but certainly in animation would be great too. That's something that's mine, and just try to bring it to life and see what happens. But gosh, guys, it really is a coin flip, a roll of the dice, a moonshot, really. But like I say, I got to keep trying, because what else can I do?
Of course. You mentioned that you did a bit of live action. I noticed Young Hercules was one of your credits.
Okay, once again, our good friend Eric Lewald was. Here's what happened there. Eric and Julia were running RoboCop Alpha Commando.
Yes,
and then got the call. I'm not sure how, they probably can tell you, but they got the call to go over and run for Fox Kids Young Hercules, which was Rob Tappert and Sam Raimi's spin-off of Hercules and Xena. Okay. So and these were being shot on a very fast pace and a low budget down in New Zealand where Hercules was being shot. And so Eric and Julie went off to do that, and I picked up the last few episodes of RoboCop to story edit and sort of finish that off. And then I got a chance to write a couple of episodes of Young Hercules. And of course, that was like this wonderful step back into live action because that's what I wanted to be when I grew up. So it was great fun, and the people making it, again, really smart, talented folk. And so a bunch of us came over from, Eric brought in a bunch of folk from the animation world and some live action writers too that were, part of that milieu there at their production, Raimi and Tappert's production company. And then got to do that. And actually they turned out pretty well. They were a lot of fun. And one of them was rather serious, going to the underworld, and there was death involved. And when you're writing cartoons, generally you can't kill characters, guest stars, or anybody, even people in the background. So you're able to do real life and death stuff. Thank you. Yes, may I have another, please? So it was a nice little sort of tease, and there were a few residuals involved because, as you guys know, people who write animation, unless you're writing one of the primetime Fox series, there are no residuals. So, cash that comes in the mail. We all like that. We'd like to have that.
That was a perennial favorite of mine as a kid, and also starred a very famous Canadian who seemed to go a place or two beyond that show. So
he's done all right for himself.
Yeah, he did all right.
He was a skinny little. I'm not sure he was even. Was he out of his teens? Was he like 20 or something?
No, I think he was still. I think he was doing the show called Breaker High, which is pretty popular on like YTV or something when we were kids. And then I think that was after that. I think he's a little older. I don't think he was quite an adult yet, but he'd been child acting most of his life. So
yeah, no, he's been at it a while, and yes, as you say, it's worked out rather well for Ryan Gosling. So.
Yeah, he's doing pretty good. He's Ken in the new Barbie movie, so he's doing.
That's right, and that looks hilarious.
I'm very excited for that. It looks very fun.
Yeah, there's something that I didn't play with Barbies, but I did have a GI Joe or two. So anyway, that's my childhood again, popping up in strange ways.
I'll throw it to Davan.
I wonder. Because we hear about actors and stuff getting typecast and pigeonholed and stuff like that. Do you find that happens with writers as well, or even yourself? Like,
absolutely.
Can you spend like too much time in animation and then you're sort of stuck there?
Absolutely. No. Like I said, I've written a couple hundred episodes, and none of them count for very much at all in live action because that's for a lot of people, not always. That's just cartoons. Even though it's the exact same thing, we are telling stories, and some of them are. Look, there are terrible writers in animation, and there are terrible writers in live action, and there are some good writers in animation and some good writers in live action. But there is a kind of a schism, less so now, but certainly in the old days, before there were all these animated streaming series, where animation became very hot. There was this, that's different. And again, historically, I won't bore your viewers with this, but historically, most animation was written under an IATSE, Local 839, now called the Animation Guild. It used to be Motion Picture Screen Cartoonists. And then there's the live action stuff, which is written under the Writers Guild. And the compensation and the protections and the residuals, there are no direct residuals in writing for animation. That's considerably lower. So there's a disparity in terms of cash being paid for the work. And so, of course, that is reflected in the perceived quality of it. But anyway, that's, this is a long-standing issue.
It's so nuts to me because, like animation is predominantly, I mean, obviously there's lots of outliers that are aimed at adults, but it's like the kids thing. Like all the biggest kid shows of all time pretty much are all animated. So to put it in a box that's like this has no value, or not no value, but it's a lesser value than live action is crazy, because like all my friends have kids. All those kids watch Paw Patrol or all these shows that are animated. Right. And like you can't tell me those shows aren't multi-million billion-dollar industry, some of them. And the people writing the thing, like it wouldn't exist without that. So it just drives me nuts that that this whole chunk of the world is like diminished because of it's a cartoon.
And that is to the advantage of the studio.
Of course, yes, of course.
They
have to pay you as much.
For them, it's it's a cash issue. But anyway, listen, we don't need to talk labor relations at this point.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
I'll put you guys to
sleep. The audience loves labor relations.
Our fan base is very labor relations. I'm kidding. But hey, Davan, go ahead.
It's a source of constant conversation, shall we say? And especially now with the negotiations that are taking place between the Writers Guild and the AMPTP, the producers unit. So whatever I say will be almost out of date immediately. So never mind, press on.
Well, it's funny because I listen to podcasts from some people that write for movies, and and usually they're not really about writing. They just are writers that are doing other stuff. And I pick one. I usually go through the whole catalog as I'm doing stuff, and as I catch up to current date, every once in a while, one of them will talk about some issue between the union and the producers and blah blah blah. So I think one that's maybe about a year and a half ago is also talking about a close to strike, is where I'm at roughly in their run. So it's just really funny to that issue never seems to stop. It just completely
because
trudges on.
Every 3 years contracts expire and stuff has to happen to keep pace with things. Script notes by John August and Craig Mason, excuse me. That's one of the very best ones, because that talks about the craft of writing as well as the business of writing. So, and they've been, I think they're on their
that sounds great
594th episode or something.
Oh, yeah, I'll plug it in.
They've been doing this a while, So listen to that on your Apple Podcasts.
Oh, or whatever. We'll do.
Yeah,
awesome. Davan, go ahead.
Here's an interesting question. I mean, you say you're a DC guy, and that's fine too. But is there like if you could have any
don't diminish
if you could have any no I'm just saying, like, that's kind of maybe where his answer to this question will lead.
Well,
if you could have any superpower, I asked this to everybody, what would it be?
Well, my favorite character growing up was the Green Lantern, and I there's a photo of me at some birthday party where we all dressed in costume, and I dressed up as the Green Lantern. So that would be cool.
Construct.
Yeah, I just thought the character was terribly interesting. There have been multiple iterations of it since my Green Lantern was Hal Jordan. Most people in your age group, it would be John Stewart. And I have had the privilege of writing for that character briefly. And Phil Lamar is the voice of John Stewart in the DC animated stuff, or has been for the most part.
I did want to ask you about that. So,
well, we can spend the rest of the hour on how wonderful the voice actors, all of the voice actors that I've had a privilege to write for. They're just terrific people, so talented and nice. I mean, smart and funny and nice. We don't see, but when we write cartoons, we don't see the show on a sound stage. We don't see the show in front of a studio audience, which is where I started wanting to be a sitcom writer. But what the closest we get to opening night is if we're fortunate enough to be invited to a recording session. And so you're sitting behind the glass with the engineer and the voice director and the showrunners and all those people. And you hear these extraordinarily talented people take your words and make them better. And there is no greater pleasure in this weird little corner of the business than that. It is so much fun. And then I get to be, and people who do what I do, we all get to be fans of these people. They're Rob Paulsons and Maurice LaMarches of the world, the Jim Cummings of the world, like I mentioned, Phil, Tara Strong, all these people are just amazing, really amazing. And as soon as some of them walk into the room, I'm laughing. It just whatever they do is hilarious. And so that really sort of fills up the tank. And you say, oh gosh, I got to do one of these again. So that's been a great joy. And I consider myself very privileged to be in that situation. It doesn't happen often, especially if you're a freelancer. But if it happens, ooh boy, it's like going to the fair. It's great.
Like when you got the gig to do the Justice League Unlimited, was it Unlimited at that point, or just Justice League? It was just Justice League at that point, yeah. Like, was it a submit something, or did you pick something because you wanted Green Lantern, or?
I was still on staff at Warner Brothers, still involved, finishing up, I guess. I don't remember the chronology, on Static Shock. So I got to write 2 stories and the story and teleplay of one of them. And it was a Justice League which had Metamorpho in it.
Yeah, which was awesome. I love that episode because I love Metamorpho. And it was it was cool to see a character that was so classic injected into what was more modern version of the Justice League. And so I really enjoyed that.
Here's a little asterisk on that one. The voice actor wwho did that was Tom Sizemore, who just passed recently.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
I did not know he was the voice of him. That's amazing.
Well, Andrea Romano, who would, all of these voice directors are wonderful, but Andrea would bring in these people from all parts of the industry and said, you want to come play with us? She is just an amazing voice director and and a lovely person as well. Anyway, so she would bring in people like that. And, I think when I did an episode of The Batman, I think Dermot Mulrooney was the
really?
Hal Jordan for that one.
That's awesome.
But anyway, but most of the time, during my time at Warner Brothers, and things have changed obviously since, Phil Lamar was the voice of John Stewart, Green Lantern. And there's, no nicer guy in the business. He's just wonderful, wonderful fellow.
Fantastic voice, yeah.
Yeah, great voice. So versatile. Oh my goodness. That's the thing. They're all so versatile. They can do so many things. And, they have this toolkit where you say, what have you got for this? And they'll come up with something and they'll give you another version and another version. I don't know. It's an extraordinary skill set.
There are a few animated shows that really capture, like, that are based on the source material, like a comic book, that really capture the feel, like the best version of that. Like X-Men was one, Justice League, and Batman the Animated Series was another. I'm massive fans of all those shows. So and Spider-Man as well. The Fox Spider-Man cartoon was good as well.
Yeah.
So, but that's the Justice League. I think. Well, I think Batman and Justice League are very unique in how amazingly put together that series was.
Yes, I agree. Again, the Warner Brothers stuff. Well, Batman the Animated Series and X-Men the Animated Series began more or less at the same time. Mm-hmm. The difference was that Warner Brothers, both had wonderful writing and producing and directing, but the Warner Brothers shows had like 5 times the budget.
Oh yeah, you can tell.
Yeah, you can tell, but still they show up because the storytelling is so good.
Yeah.
But in terms of just the fluidity of the animation, the musical scores that what was her name? I believe the late Shirley Walker did in the early Warner Brothers stuff. It's just brilliant work. And so, yeah, those things will be watched as long as there's television in one form or another. Just because they're just so well made. And like I say, I got a chance to work with Alan Burnett, and there's Paul Dini and all of the people. Bruce Timm, of course, was sort of the creative on the art side fellow on all of those shows, and these are all very, very, very good at their jobs. So when you're lucky enough to have a show like made by people of this quality, you say, well, okay, this is going to be something I can show with pride, even if it's only cartoons.
All right, Davan, you're up on your way.
Have you ever thought of, or have you maybe ever written for comics or ever wanted to?
No, I wanted to, yes. Done so, no. I do have some friends who have done so and and it's again something I've never really pursued. But if there were an opportunity, I'd jump at it. In fact, Paul Dini and Alan Brennan have been writing a series of sort of a continuation of Batman the Animated Series in comic book form. They've done several iterations of that. And
Ty Templeton works on that. I'm a fan of him as well.
Yes,
so,
yes. And so again, it's great fun. But again, no, it's something I've never done. I was just a reader, never a reader. But I do have friends. There's a young lady I know named Amy Chase who works at Sideshow Collectibles, people who build all those wonderful, insanely expensive maquettes. I got one. I got this as a gift. I wouldn't have bought it for myself, heavens knows. But she has now started writing comic books, and she just had her first major title. It's something I didn't know until she told us about it. They're doing a horror line at Archie Comics.
Oh, yes.
So she's got a couple of credits going on there and other things. And, like I say, Alan and Paul doing their stuff. Certainly Dennis Cowan, who was one of the co-creators of all the Milestone comics. He's involved with the creation of new Static Shock comics. He's a wonderful artist. And he worked on the Static Shock cartoon show as a director. Anyway, so it's a different business. I'm fascinated by it, but I've not pursued it. I should have given that as the short answer, and we could go on to something else. Sorry.
Well, mention your connection to comics. I mean, and you work closely, obviously, on Static Shock with Dwayne McDuffie. He's very, very beloved by his fan base for the Icon series and the Milestone comics and where Static Shock appeared initially. And a bunch of his comic writing beyond that. Do you have much of a relationship with him?
Well, yes, and I'm going to try to avoid crying, but here's the deal. Dwayne was not involved. He had co-created the character that was the star of Static Shock, but Dwayne was not intimately involved in the production of Static Shock. He was just writing on it, like yours truly. And in fact, I think he was even living in Florida at that point. But anyway, he eventually moved here. And then went on staff at Warner Brothers and moved up very, very quickly because he was, I don't know how much you know about Dwayne. He's passed. I think he passed in 2011.
It's a while ago now, yeah.
People use the word genius a lot for people who are in the creative fields. He was actually a genius. I mean, the guy went to high school when he went to college when he was like 14 or something like that. And then went back to high school just to have a regular childhood, and then went to college again and got 2 degrees at University of Michigan. Was writing at Marvel and DC, was one of the creators of the Milestone comic line, which was the first African-American owned comic book company. And with his partners, created all of those terrific characters, eventually distributed by DC. But anyway, so Dwayne saw much, thankfully, Dwayne saw the work I'd done on Static Shock, liked what he saw of the work I did. And when he went over, and when he was finished on Justice League Unlimited, he went over to Cartoon Network and he did a sort of a reboot-ish thing of Ben 10, which was the original, Ben Tennyson was a fairly young character. He aged him up and so told a slightly different kind of story about Ben 10, but still he had the Omnitrix and all that sort of thing. So he liked the work that I'd done. And so he asked me, because again, I'm freelancing at this point, to start writing for his versions of Ben 10. So I ended up writing, 16 for Dwayne on 2 or 3 versions of, let's see, there was Ultimate Alien and anyway, there were a couple of different versions. I'm sorry, guys. I'm
sorry. No worries at all.
Confused. Too many stories running in my head. Anyway, I did 2 versions of that. Hold on. Yes, Ultimate Alien, and another one. And then when Dwayne passed, tragically, and I do mean tragically because what an extraordinary talent, what a loss for all of us, really.
Yeah.
And then his widow, Charlotte, and his best friend from high school and college, Matt Wayne, were the story editors on Ben 10 Omniverse. And so I worked on 3 versions of the Ben 10 series and did a total of 24. And as I said, I got a chance to write some weird stuff. I got really dark stuff and big, broad comedy. And, it was that kind of show that you could sort of, the road was wide enough so you could do all sorts of cool things within the Ben 10 story setup. So, Dwayne, God, it's a tragedy to have lost him. An extraordinary talented man, so smart. He read probably read a book a night, probably could write a book a night. Just what a talent. Anyway, so there we've done another eulogy for him, and it's a shame.
Well, he was such an innovator in the comic industry for all those, for creating basically a line of black superheroes that wasn't really something that was, they existed, but never like a whole line where every series really focused on a different one. And it was such a cool, great concept. The books were great. Even when he tried his hand at regular Marvel stuff, all those books are fantastic too. So, I think we're all kind of surprised when he passed, and it was very sad.
Well, it was just a shock.
Yeah.
I knew he'd had some health problems, which, he's talked about. But he, it was a giant, literally, in every way. He was a big fella, and he was a giant just in terms of intellect and his stature in the business. And anyways, sorry. Okay,
that's all right. I don't want to make you.
He was a great guy, and I was privileged to know him. I learned a lot from him. I as much as I like to think, oh gee, I've got this figured out. No, I learned so much from him, and especially going to bat for stories that you care about. He did that, and who's going to argue with him? He was right, with whatever it is he was doing, and it was very powerful and persuasive, and we all who knew him miss him.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's brought the whole conversation down.
Sorry, perhaps on a lighter note. No, that's perfectly fine. Perhaps on a lighter note regarding Static Shock, friend of the show Rick Hoberg told us that when we get to Spider-Man, he'll come back and tell us all the dirt on John Semper Jr. Now, since you were both writers on Static Shock, can I assume you also have a mountain of dirt on John Semper Jr.?
I would not like to answer that question.
Plead the fifth.
Here's the thing. It's so easy, and this isn't, about any individual in particular, but it's so easy to say, oh, well, this person did that, and this person did another thing. Life's too short. We all are trying to do our best. We're all trying to be creative and stuff like that. I don't want to diss anybody, especially not on on the airwaves or whatever this is.
Rick doesn't seem to mind.
I will look forward to watching all of your podcasts so I can hear all of the dirt on all these people that I would not personally say.
Quite all right.
Okay.
No, very cool. Go ahead.
We don't deal in the dirt business.
No,
I'm not in the dirt business.
Neither are we.
We never want the show to be a gotcha kind of show. It's mostly just a celebration of the sort of the work. So, yeah.
All right. So,
Davan, you got another one?
Is there another lighter note that I can can dodge awkwardly?
Definitely. Let's see how you dodge this one.
Okay.
Here's one. So, which has the best theme song of these shows you worked on? X-Men, Darkwing Duck, Gummy Bears, DuckTales, or Chippendales Rescue Rangers?
Oh man, those are all bangers.
The best. Yeah, I know, right?
So good. Oh my gosh.
Darkwing Duck is my ringtone. Darkwing Duck is my ringtone on my phone. So
they're all great. You basically did the top 5 or whatever.
Real Sophie's Choice you're giving him here.
Everybody as soon as you hear bump, 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 you know you're doing the DuckTales. When you hear ba-la-la-da-da, you're going to say, oh, X-Men. And everybody sings along. When you go to these conventions, it's so weird. Everybody, they start playing that stuff, and everybody is singing along, even if there are no words. But when there are words, they're definitely all singing along. So, yeah, you've got many generations now, which is kind of weird to think about, of people who are fans of all these shows, and it's part of their DNA. One of the things people in my end of the world hear a lot when you go to these conventions is, oh, thank you, you made my childhood. And sometimes you want to say, I apologize, but the correct answer is, oh, that's very kind of you to say thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed, and I'm glad you watched the show, because without those people, none of us would have had jobs. So, I'd still be working in the drugstore where I worked in high school. So this is better. And I'm glad people are fond of these things. Which is the best one? They're all good. They're all fabulous, but again, I grew up, singing the theme songs from like Super Chicken and things like that. So don't go by me, I mean, this goes back a bit, but look it up anyway. So you had Jay Ward stuff.
You mentioned, when writing, obviously trying to stay on task for what the sense of the show is, as far as keeping the tone and all that stuff similar, not going dark in a light show, vice versa. So the end of Bloodlines actually was one of my favorite, but I think it was as close to horror, or one of the close to horrors the X-Men cartoon show got, when they dump Victor, or when they dump Graydon Creed off on Victor's doorstep. That was a fantastic little stinger to end the show on, that I thought was really fun.
I agree.
Sort of the horror cabin and everything.
Yeah, it's just like he's just standing on. You see the shadow of him standing on the deck, watching him parachute down towards him, and you know where it's going, but you're just like, the full size of him, the at nighttime, Creed obviously losing his mind. All of that stuff was very unique and very fun. So do you like to pepper that stuff in, or just where it can be, or do you have a proclivity to that?
Calls for it. I mean, where that was a show all about dysfunctional family relationships, and come to Papa was the only appropriate response.
And we hadn't seen him on the show for a couple seasons. He hadn't been on for a while.
And I don't believe Graydon Creed ever made another appearance in the series.
No, neither did Victor, I don't think.
Yeah.
So or Mystique, or a few other characters.
Really, ever after, I'm certain of it.
Yeah, maybe the new show will be revisited, but
and I full disclosure, I know absolutely nothing about the new show except what I read, and I'm looking forward to it a lot, because I think the people involved are all huge fans of the original series, and I know that Eric and Julia and Larry have all been consultants on the show. And, from everything they say, and they're very, of course, circumspect about that, but it sounds like things are in very good hands. And also they have a much bigger budget than the original series, so it'll probably also look really good while paying homage to the style of the show, but just with higher production values. So whenever it comes out, I'm going to be glued to the set too.
Well, I'm not sure. You must be aware that they promoted the Nightcrawler to one of the main roster. He's going to be one of the main characters in the show.
I am aware. Yes.
So that is great that the legacy of your character continues on. And
again, not my character.
Well, your version of the character. So
I got to play with him. He appeared in. I think he appeared in X-Men Revolution, and I'm not sure if he was in Wolverine and the X-Men, but I did write for him, I think, briefly in the I did one episode of Revolution, one episode of Wolverine and the X-Men. So but it's a great character. I think, now you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, I think he may have appeared previously in other X-Men kind of
only the pilot for they did a pilot for an X-Men show that never got picked up before they did this one, and he was the
hero in that one.
Yeah,
he was like the big hero at the end of that one.
I got to sort of carry him for a while, but other people have done it since, and of course you've seen him appear in live action.
Yeah, but there are certain versions of certain characters, especially ones that get rebooted a lot, that everyone has their favorite, and or the one that, like, when you think of your version of the character, this is the one that to me is what that character is. And I think for a lot of people,
that's lovely.
Your
lovely
Nightcrawler is.
Thank you. I like I say, I got lucky to be handed the assignment, and I'm glad that people enjoy what I did with it. You look at these things.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I know. I was just saying, you look at these things after the fact, and you say, okay, would I have done things differently now than I did umpty years ago? Yeah, probably. But all in all, people respond well to it, and I just have to say thank you. Anyway,
I think the version of the character they used for the movie was very much based on your interpretation of the character in the cartoons.
I've heard that before, and would be very flattering if that were the case. There is the story, which has been published elsewhere, that Bryan Singer never read any of the comics. He watched the original cartoon series, and we've heard that from people who were actually involved in the live action stuff. So
it's funny. We even referenced that in last episode, because while watching Bloodlines, the setting for that episode is very much the setting for X-Men 2. At the end, it all ends in a big fight in a dam that you have to hold back, and it looks almost exactly the same as the movie, like where the final fight takes place.
I don't think I ever noticed that before. I'll have to go back and watch.
You know what? Maybe consult your lawyers. I think there's some maybe.
Well,
all work for hire. I have no claim of ownership.
I was going to say, who are they going to sue themselves? I mean, Fox did both, so
it's all Disney now. It's all one big happy family.
It's like the Ruddles; they accidentally sued themselves. So,
Davan, you got anything else? We should let Mr. Uhley go.
Well, I got to ask you Andre's favorite question, which is, what's your favorite movie?
That is my favorite question.
I have several, so I can't answer just one.
That's sorry. All right. Shoot them out there. We'll take them all.
I do that all the time.
All right. Yep. In the way of comedies, things like Dave, That Thing You Do.
Yes.
Wow. I'll watch those anytime they're on TV. They're certainly the original X-Men movie I thought was very good. I enjoyed it a lot. The original Superman, the 1978 Superman, even though some parts of it are a little corny, that is, to my mind, that is Superman as I grew up thinking of Superman. I've liked, a lot of the Christopher Nolan Batman stuff, if you're talking about superhero stuff. Certainly, when you look at some of the Phase 1 and Phase 2 Avengers movies, they're brilliantly made. They're just terrific. Hard Day's Night.
Nice.
Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Classic.
I mean, guys, this could go on for days.
Yeah, it's all good stuff.
I just, as you can tell, it's eclectic and weird, and I like musicals, and Singing in the Rain and stuff like that, and
that's the sign of a good writer. Your interests are broad. You need to be able to.
Bringing Up Baby, fabulous film. It happened. Fabulous film. These are stuff that you say, oh my gosh, if I could write something on 1/10 as good as these things. But, again, Marx Brothers movies, come on, all of this stuff is foundational. This is what everybody has tried to do. I'm sure there's a dozen Martin Scorsese films I could talk about, too.
Yeah, well.
Given the chance, but, especially his musical work. But don't laugh. He did do New York, New York.
I was going to say, that's the only one I would say, isn't it? Yeah.
But, I mean, gosh, I should have the right answer. I should have one film in my
there's no right answer. There isn't.
No, there's just a lot of films, and
I think it depends on who you are at the time. Is what you're like. People change, right? You're never the you were before, so it just depends on what you are now as to what your favorite movie is. I think for most people,
probably would not enjoy Seven Voyages of Sinbad as much as I did when I was 5.
This is still fun. I like the Harryhausen. I'll watch any of those.
Again, great. You know, how can you say, oh well, gee, you know, we wouldn't have that kind of movie today, all the monster films today, without all of those things that preceded.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
I'll take the Harryhausen.
Yeah, for sure. Ray Harryhausen was the man.
And I'll also throw in Harry and the Hendersons, a lovely film.
Love Harry and the Hendersons. I used to watch that all the
time.
My brother-in-law directed that.
Oh, what, really?
Yes.
Wow, that's very interesting.
Yeah, and it's a charming film, and I think one of the best of the sort of Spielberg produced by movies, you know, but I may be slightly biased to the familial content.
Well, it was as far like the days of those sort of those family friendly sort of movies that appeal to everyone that aren't like a movie that I feel like the days are kind of gone where you would get a family movie that was appealed to the whole family. You know, like a lot of them are either aimed at the kids or aimed at the adults, and it's not usually something that's everybody. I don't feel like I see those as much.
That's what Disney animated features and DreamWorks animated features and things like that, Pixar, you know, as a division of Disney. That's what those films do now. They give everybody something to watch and enjoy together. Mm-hmm. And in the cartoon business, the thing that I do, and so many of the people that you've talked with, our job is to entertain the family. Mm-hmm. And you know, it's what we, instead of calling it children's animation now, what the terminology we use is kids and family. Mm-hmm. It's different than adult animation or, you know, primetime animation or whatever you want to call it. What mm-hmm. we do is we entertain. We hope we tell a story that engages the kids and they find funny or charming or whatever, and the parents can sit through it, because all of us, you know, as parents who've sat through some dreck, you know, you don't
yeah.
You want to keep the parents awake while you're, you know, having the funny animal do silly things. So you give them enough so that there's something for them too, you know, and it can be something like Octonauts, which is an absolutely brilliant series. You could be something like Stillwater, which is an absolutely beautiful preschool show. I've written on a couple of episodes of that, which is on
Apple. What is that called again? I have a toddler. I'll have to.
Stillwater. It's on Apple Plus. And it's the showrunner on that is a very, very good writer and showrunner named Rob Hoagie. And he has made something. It's mindfulness is what they teach. Mm-hmm. And it's at a completely different pace than anything we do normally. It is quiet and contemplative, and it's gorgeously animated. And they've won a Peabody and an Emmy, or a couple of them. And it's absolutely brilliant. Another show I worked for Rob a few years ago was Thunderbirds Are Go, a reboot of the old puppet show, but done with CG characters and oftentimes, you know, miniature location sets. So it was a beautiful show out of the UK. ITV was one of the producers on it, based on the old, you know, Super Marionette stuff. Like,
I used to watch a lot of those old reruns when I was a kid on ITV.
So much fun. Yeah. Really feature quality animation. It was what a pleasure. I wrote a couple, 3 of those. Just great stuff. So, you know, anything with Rob's name on it, you know, it's going to be gorgeous. But Nico and the Sword of Light, Sword and Sorcery action adventure show, he produced that too. He's one of those go-to guys. But then I've been working for on some British shows, one of which will come out next month on Netflix. I can't say its name, and there's an NDA, but I'm working with the story editor on that. Was the same story editor on something called Robozuna, which was a British show. And I worked with Kevin Hops 30 some years ago. He was my story editor on Darkwing Duck. So, you know who you like who you know, you work together if you're lucky. And so these are friendships that were formed back in those days that continue today.
I like that about the writer's world. It seems like it's very incestuous in that way, that you guys become friends and you just continue and help each other's projects.
Incestuous, more.
Yeah, I suppose.
I wouldn't use that word either.
Familiar.
Well, you know, if you're lucky enough, you get to work with some wonderful people, and I've been lucky enough. And so you get to see how our careers have ebbed and flowed over time. So, once in a while you get a chance to go back to the well and say, "Oh, hi, fellas, we're back." Anyway.
Well, we should probably let you go. I think we take enough of your time, but I just wanted to thank you so much for being on the show, and just to ask, like, as far as a writer, like, legacy is probably something that you probably think about, I'd imagine, on a regular basis. So, if you had to pick, as far as like the things in your canon that you would like to be remembered for, what would you like those to be?
Wow. Again, there's not just one. I mean,
yeah, that's fine.
The Nightcrawler thing, people will remember that for a long time.
Yeah.
Some of the early stuff on the Disney Afternoon, people remember that stuff fondly. The American Tale and Land Before Time movies I did for Universal, they have their fans. Certainly, my work on Static Shock and Ben 10, I'm very proud of all of that. But I hope that people will remember enjoying the stuff that I did, and that it'll still provide some kind of, it's a good company and a few laughs, and maybe, tug at the heartstrings a little. That's why we write. That's what we're just silly enough to think that people should hear about how we feel about the world. I have something to say, and my perspective requires your attention. It's a weird mindset. It really is, because who really cares? But if you're fortunate enough to get to do this for a living, and it is a very weird way to make a living, I've been very lucky. That's all. So if people like what I've written over the years, I'm thrilled.
Well, a lot of folks do. I can tell you that much. So definitely yes.
Very touched. Thank you.
And part of our childhoods, for sure.
Yeah, huge.
Pleasure to meet you.
Yes, thank you so much, Len. It was awesome talking to you.
Guys, thank you so much for inviting me, and good luck with the next. Who's up at bat next? Whatever it is, I hope it goes.
Well, we watch. We take breaks in
Lawrence
between. Is that who's next?
Yeah, the next interview is Lawrence Bain, the
cool
voice actor of Cable.
Oh, really? That's awesome. I didn't even know that. That's fantastic. Cool.
Well, life is full of surprises, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, we generally just watch episodes of the show and review them, and then we split it up with interviews once in a while. So.
One last point.
Yeah.
I actually had a chance to meet half a dozen of the voice actors who worked on the original X-Men series. I'd never met them. They're in Canada. I was here, but we were all together at a convention at the Grand Rapids Comic Con.
Yeah, I think I saw Lenore was posting a lot a lot of that. She's from my area where I live now.
Oh, so, yeah? Okay. Yeah. Well, it was a pleasure to meet her. Just, again, lovely, charming, funny, smart people. So that was kind of a kick to finally hear the voices of these people umpty years later. And Eric and Julia and Larry had met some of them before at other conventions, but this was my first opportunity. And really nice folk, and I hope we'll have a chance to do that again, because that was a real kick at Grand Rapids Comic Con to sit down and be on panels with these people and chat with them afterwards, and break bread and all that sort of thing. Anyway,
I feel like there's such a resurgence for the show now that there's definitely going to be a lot more of that coming down the pipeline, I'd imagine, for you guys. So
one would hope, because we're always glad to have someone send us a plane ticket and a per diem and say, come and talk to us, because we're lonely. We sit in our room.
Writing is alone. I hear that often in some of those pods. Very solitary.
It's very silly. So we're always glad to have company.
Tickets in the mail, but since we've already done the interview, we'll just have to hang.
Thank you. If you can work that out for us to get us up to Canada, or better yet, I hear there are a couple of really nice conventions in London and Edinburgh, so we could, or Manchester. So if you can ship us overseas, that'd be terrific.
Absolutely, I'd love to be there with you.
Edinburgh.
Oh,
yeah, exactly. Bring X-Rated, the X-Men animated review show too.
Yeah, we do a live episode of this at the event. That's a great idea.
Right.
We should be there too.
The time zone difference, right? And we've kept you up past your bedtime, guys. I'm sorry.
No, not at all. We're good. We're night owls, so.
All right.
I have a toddler. I don't sleep.
That's right. Well, that changes. Eventually, they go off to school.
Yeah, and I'm just a workaholic with cats, so.
All right. Cats are good too. Like cats. All right, guys, you've been great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Len. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Len.
All right,
bye-bye.
Take it easy. 1, 2, 3.